Now that the initial 39 characters of KOF 15 are all announced, it's time to assess the roster of the latest installment of SNK's flagship franchise. Overall, the developers did a great job when they brought back fan favorites who were absent for a long time and even managed to shatter expectations with new team arrangements that frankly nobody saw coming. On the other hand, I can't deny that I was surprised and disappointed by the absence of some essential figures who I think would have added a lot to the game if they were in it. Characters who are loved because of their rich legacy, fun gameplay, or have unfinished story arcs. Before we continue, I am well aware that the final roster of KOF 15 is far from being complete. The game will surely have multiple DLCs, and some, if not all of those entries, may end up joining the cast. But for now, I'm judging the game's roster in its initial release stage. I also included multiple characters in some entries, so even if the video is a top 10 list, they are actually more than 10. Finally, Ryuuko is not in this list. I know he wasn't announced yet, but I refuse to believe he is not in the game. I mean, the collector edition is called the Omega edition. There is no way Ryuuko is not in 15. Right? Right? Without further ado, here's the top 10 biggest absentees in KOF 15. Team China, also known as Team Psycho Soldier, is a mainstay in KOF's roster since '94, at least in earlier games. It was with 2003 that things started to change within its members. It was the first time when Chen and Kensu were absent. Only Athena returned in a totally different team with Hinako and Meilin. This situation is very similar to the recently announced Team Superheroines in KOF 15, where Athena drops her usual teammates in favor of Mai and Yuri. Chen is a curious case. He's either very good or really bad. His best versions are arguably in 02 and of course in 13. He is a total beast in the latter. Unfortunately, his presence in 14 is quite weak. He's still got the same moveset from 13, but without the game's mechanics, he doesn't even compare to the shadow of his version there. Kensu has always been a middle tier character. He is a solid zoner in all games, except in 2000 where he lost his fireballs, and he is a very beginner friendly fighter thanks to his straightforward and easy to remember moveset. He's been absent only in 2003, and unlike his master, he did return in 11 with probably one of his best versions ever, combining his classic playstyle and some original moves from 2000. We still don't know the actual reasons of the absence of Kensu and Chen story-wise. One thing that I hope beside their return is the continuation of Kensu's Dragon Spirit arc. Seriously, why this story isn't going anywhere? We didn't forget about it, you know. It took a lot of time for a Samurai Shodown character to make a jump to the KOF series. Although she made her first appearance in the Game Boy port of KOF 95, we can safely say that Nakururu made her official canonical entrance in 14 in a strange team from another world composed of pachinko figures, love hearts and Mui. And that is kind of a problem, but more on that in a minute. Nakururu is a super popular figure, not just in Samshu but in all SNK's repertoire. Her playstyle wasn't ideally implemented in KOF at first, let's be honest. She was quite cheap and dealing with her was very infuriating. Encountering Nakururu players online was the norm. She was in every team. Thankfully, after some patches, she became more balanced and a lot less of a headache. Her interaction with the several OG KOF figures was also interesting, especially the one with Vice and Chen, so it's normal that one would think that after she's finally a canonical KOF character, she would stay in its roster for a while. However, she is nowhere to be found in the initial 39 character of 15. That may have something to do with her two aforementioned teammates. SNK no longer possess the rights to use Hearts and Mui, which leaves Nakururu alone for the time being. If only there was another franchise from where there are characters she could team up with. One thing we can all agree on is how KOF 15 gathers multiple charismatic figures from different arcs of the franchise. We basically have one team and a rival one from each chapter, except when it comes to the Tales of Ash saga. It is clearly underrepresented so far. With the exception of Ash and Elizabeth, no original figure from that saga is present, which is a huge shame because that story arc had multiple good additions to it. My personal favorite being the trio Shen, Dulon and Oswald. Shen is this explosive, super aggressive but not evil at all dude. His playstyle is actually not that difficult. He can be a good starting point for newcomers. Dulon is the cold and reserved assassin from the Hizoku clan. Unlike Shen, he can be tricky to learn with his speedy playstyle and the inexplicably stretchable limbs he has that give him access to every corner of the stage. He's kinda like Dasim, only 10 times faster. Finally, Oswald is the retired hitman who knows everyone in the KOF universe. His fighting style, named Carnofel, is as unique as it's fun to watch. Using a deck of slashing cards, Oswald can be a bit challenging to master, but he is nowhere near to Angel's level thankfully. As far as I'm concerned, he is the best OG Ash Saga character, both in terms of design and playstyle. I can easily see these three as a canonical team for a future DLC. I mean, they already were in the past, only with Ash replacing Oswald or Dulon. Please SNK, make this happen. The patriarch of the Sakazaki family, Takuma tends to be forgotten and left behind recently for some reason. Once he was the final boss of the original Art of Fighting, one of the secret bosses of SVC Chaos, and the leader of the Art of Fighting team all the way back in KOF 94. He made several appearances throughout the franchise, the most recent of them was in 13. Like many characters, Takuma had become sort of the comic relief of the band. It's not a bad thing per se, but it kinda diminishes his character now that he remains stuck in that stereotype. Let's not forget that Takuma is a total badass, easily one of the strongest senior fighters in KOF, someone who is held in high esteem by his peers. He is the origin of most of Ryo, Robert and Yuri's techniques, and he still got exclusive moves that none other than him has. Takuma has different playstyles. He could be a zoner with his super fast fireballs, or a close-ranged fighter with his counters and hard-to-punish special moves. Not to mention the Mr. Karate persona, an absolute monster and a top-tier figure in 13. All of his students are present in 15, so there is no room for him in an Art of Fighting team. But why not create a new version of the Masters team and make it canon this time? Surely there are a lot of characters who would love to team up with this legend for a future DLC. When I made a video about the characters we want to see in KOF 15, I made a joke during the number 1 entry, pretending that the place was reserved for the American sports team, only to reveal that the winner of that list was actually the Arashi team. Now that we know that Yashiro and his friends are part of 15's roster, I think it's time to take that joke seriously. Brian, the American football player, is the tank of the group. He is my least favorite of the team personally, but no one can deny or ignore how hard he hits. In the hands of a good player, he can be a serious threat. Lucky is the fastest of the group. His basketball projectiles have a unique trajectory and can be a fearsome zoner. His speed is on par with that of Chris's, has a reliable DP, and the super that looks very similar to Terry's Power Geyser. His AI was such a pain to fight in 98. Arguably the most popular of the trio is Heavy D. Despite being a boxer, a fighting style that is not original in KOF, his techniques are unique and fun to use. They look nothing like those of Vanessa or Nelson. Heavy D, Lucky and Brian were present in only one canon game, the very first installment, KOF 94. They did come back in 98 of course, and it is thanks to their presence there that they are so popular, but other than that, they were never playable again. Even worse, they were reduced to a running joke, as they are always beaten by others off screen and getting their invitations stolen. I think it's high time for a payback, even if they have scores to settle with half of KOF's roster. Despite of how much fans are asking for his return, Shingo Yabuki always seems to draw the short straw among all the potentially returning candidates. After he took a serious beating from Iori at the end of KOF 11, he was never seen again, except for some cameos in 13. I think what makes Shingo such a fan favorite is the contrast between his goofy personality and the incredible raw strength that he possesses. Shingo can be described as a flameless clone of the series' main protagonist Kyo. He mimics his idol's fighting techniques, resulting in the creation of rougher moves that can still hurt pretty bad and sometimes even deal greater damage than their fiery counterparts, despite looking very silly and lacking in polish. And that is actually the strength of Shingo. He is the underdog that you can't help but root for. I would have loved to see his interaction with the new figures of the Shunei saga and how he would react against Iori, the canonical cause of his long absence. This guy just keeps piling up enemies. I was seriously hoping him to make his long-awaited comeback in 15. Unfortunately, that's not gonna happen, at least as far as the main roster is concerned. I still would love to see him as a DLC in the hypothetical Disciples team. The iconic SNK villain Geese Howard has been in many KOF games. However, his presence can be considered canon in only 2 of them, 96 and 14. He is usually more active behind the scenes, where his involvement can be spotted through the presence of his most trustworthy subordinate, Billy Khan. In the last game, he finally entered KOF in person after a long absence with his aforementioned henchman and the new butler Hein, which I spoke more of in another video. We learned more about the motivation behind his participation in their team ending, as he already knew about the imminent appearance of Verse, and this is where I'm most curious about. I mean, then what? What's the deal with him exactly? He entered the tournament to confirm the prophecy in the scrolls, and that's it? You mean to tell me he didn't have any plans whatsoever? There is clearly more to his story arc that is yet to be revealed, and seeing him absent in the following sequel is just weird. We know that he's monitoring Haiden and the Ikari warriors' moves and keeping track of their activities. He is certainly planning something, and we're all curious to know what it is. His right-hand man Billy is also curious about what they should do next, and even asked his boss that same question during their team ending. Unfortunately, they got interrupted before we could get any satisfying answer from the crime boss. Bring him back in a DLC please. We want to see a canon fight between Geese and Rugal. You may think that Yamazaki, the psychopathic Yakuza, and the last living member of the Hakishu had have a lot of involvement with the KOF story, but the truth is, he was only in 2 games canonically, 97 and 2003. Yes, I know he was in the last game too, as a DLC, but that doesn't count. DLC characters had no story segments, and the few interactions they had were with other DLC latecomers. That was very disappointing for someone like me who likes the story and lore behind these characters. I was looking forward to find Yamazaki in 15 and see how he'll interact with the resurrected Team Orochi again. Sadly, that's not gonna be a thing. Considering the rich backstory he has from 2 franchises, I don't really understand why he is so often left aside. He is an extremely charismatic, pure villain, something that the series needs desperately, as I mentioned in a previous video, to balance a bit the overabundance of good guys that the roster is full of. Yamazaki has the potential to fit in many team compositions without disrupting the main story arc. You can even kick Mai out and put him in her place in the superheroines team and still would fit in there. He has a history with so many characters. Terry, Geese, Billy, Mary, the whole Orochi gang. He is a walking goldmine for future lore videos as far as I'm concerned. Yamazaki is easily one of the best fighting game characters ever created, so please stop casting him aside. He deserves to be a mainstay. Iori Yagami has been in many different team compositions throughout the series. The rival team with Billy and Eiji in 95, the Agents team with Seth, Vanessa and Ramon in 2001, the Sacred Treasures in its 2 variations with Kyo, Shizuru and Shingo in 11 and 15, and his solo entry in 97, 99, 2000 and 2003. But we can all agree that his most iconic team is the one with the inseparable duo Vice and Mature in the Yagami team. Not including the Dream Match and the non-canon entries, they were a team in 3 games so far. 96, 13, and finally 14. It's a quite impressive feat considering that Vice and Mature died in the very first game where they appeared, and then they were inexplicably brought back from the dead in 13, before even any mention of Verse and the resurrection of the dead characters that he came with. And that's what bothers me the most. We haven't learned anything new about the two evil women. How were they able to take physical form despite being ghosts? What was their objective all along? Why did they join Iori again, even though he was the one who killed them? Why didn't they try to stop him when he went to destroy Arashi at the end of 14? And so many other questions that were left unanswered. I was hoping that we'll learn a bit more about the two in 15. They would have been perfect in a team with their former boss Rugal, and I would have loved to see their interaction with other Hakishu members. How a conversation between the super rude Vice and the seductive Shermie would have gone, taking into account that the latter is the superior of the former in the Hakishu hierarchy. But it seems none of this is going to happen, and that is a big shame. I still have hope to see them in a future DLC team with their real boss, Genitz. Before unveiling the obvious number 1 spot, here's some honorable mentions. Yep, you all have guessed it. The number 1 spot of this list is of course Kim Kafwan. Nobody had the slightest doubt that he's gonna be in the roster. He is just one of these key fighters that KOF isn't quite the same without them. Characters like Benimaru, Athena, Ralph or Clark. So not seeing Kim for the first time in a KOF game is such a surprise. I guess we can say that our expectations were shattered, though not in a good way in this case. Kim is a figure that originated from the Fatal Fury series. He's been in KOF since forever and never missed a single installment. Although he is mainly a charge character, his fighting style is easy enough to learn for new players and at the same time can be tricky to fully master. He is always a good pick if you don't know which character to choose, but his strongest version is undeniably the one in 13. He is insanely good in that game. Plus, he's famous for having the best looking pants animation ever. Something that unfortunately didn't make a good transition into the third dimension with 14. The last time he was seen, he was dragged against his will by his master to train in the mountains, which could be the canonical reason behind his absence in 15. But, and that's just my unfounded guess, the real reason is that the developers didn't figure out how to properly animate those pants in 3D yet, so they scrapped him as a whole. For me though, I don't care, you could put him in shorts even, just bring Kim back. Which one of these characters you miss the most? Or is there others that I didn't mention in the list? Share your answer with us in the comments. Special thanks to my generous patrons for their support. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and why not consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.